The main reason for the developing housing crisis in Australia is the shortage of residential property, which is occurring against the backdrop of a rapidly growing population. In the lead-up of the federal election 2025, Australians are again hearing promises to fix the crisis through various irrelevant and sometimes even exotic measures, most of which fail to address the real causes of the falling housing affordability. Today we are going to break the issue down because the real economic mechanisms behind house pricing remain largely misunderstood. Hello, my name is Dr. Alexey Konashevich. Welcome to my channel. In my previous episode, I highlighted a hidden reason for the housing crisis in Australia that has long slipped under the radar, and I didn't plan to devote more videos to this topic at this stage. But after feedback, I realized that even academics misunderstand the immediate causes of the crisis. So let's step back and dissect the true issue behind it all. In economics, this mechanism is known as the equation of supply and demand that forms the price. It describes the relationship between the quantity of a commodity available in the market and the quantity that consumers are willing to purchase. It is the foundational model of price determination in economic theory. However, the notion of willingness to buy often causes confusion, and I'll explain why in a moment. There are two immediate contributing factors to skyrocketing prices: a rapidly growing population due to high immigration and lagging residential construction. The first factor pushes up both rent and property prices. That's the demand side of the equation. The second factor, the housing shortage, affects the supply side. Other elements like price of construction materials also influence the equation, or RBA rates and some others, but not as significantly as those two, or at least those factors are a part of those two. I will demonstrate the immediate mechanism of price formation. Let's take a look at this spreadsheet. On the left, we have demand. On the right, supply. To work with prices at microeconomic level, we need a standardized figure. Every house has unique features, so to compare prices meaningfully, we should use price per square meter. And normally, every unit in the market will stay within this macroeconomic factor. That's why we must bring the per square meter figure into our supply-demand formula to make national level comparisons. To carry out this analysis, we divide the total demand by total supply. Here's where the confusion often arises. Textbook definitions say demand is the quantity that consumers wish to buy, and some people think that it means we need to quantify the wish to buy. No, we don't. It's simpler than it seems. Demand is not about wishing, it's about money. It's the total dollar value in this market. So we divide the total value by total floor area of all residential properties. That gives us the average price per square meter in Australia. This figure isn't very practical for everyday use, and it's rarely published in statistical reports. Local and individual factors will always affect individual home prices, but for macroeconomic analysis it's vital. It allows us to see how prices have increased across the entire country. Back to our equation. To reflect the current state, specifically the price per square meter, we take data from the total value of dwellings reported by the Australian Bureau of Statistics. We then divide these by total dwelling stock, represented as the cumulative floor area of residential properties. That gives us the average price per square meter. It may not be entirely precise, it is sufficient for demonstrating the nature of the underlying mechanism. Now let's explore how this mechanism works. How the price rises and falls within our equation. I added these sliders so you can see yourself. When I drag the demand button up, in other words, you observe an increase in demand, it leads the price growth. An increase in supply leads to price decline. If both grow proportionally, prices tend to remain stable. Now let's look what happened during the COVID pandemic and the years that followed. Statistics show that the annual dwelling stock growth rate began to fall in pre-COVID 2019. That means fewer new houses were being built, slowing supply growth. Prices might have stayed stable if demand also slowed, but it didn't. Why? Because demand isn't just about desire, it's about purchasing power, the availability of the money in the market. During the pandemic, interest rates dropped to near zero, making money almost free to borrow. At the same time, the government injected vast amounts of money into the economy through stimulus packages, social support programs, and business aid. As a result, people had more money and access to cheap credit, leading to a surge in property buyings, even as housing stock remained low. Prices skyrocketed. Then, the Reserve Bank intervened by rapidly increasing interest rates in an attempt to cool down the market. But it was too late, as the government has already reopened and widened immigration, leading to record-high net migration. Although not every new arrival buys a home, all need accommodation. Investors with increased mortgage costs passed these on to renters, and rents also soared. The supply side failed to keep pace with either trend. All these elements created a chain reaction that led to today's housing crisis. Some argue that the government shouldn't have opened the immigration floodgates. Others say that without it, the economy would have plunged into a deep recession, as immigration is a powerful stimulus, no doubt. But the true culprit here is the failure to match population growth with residential construction. If people have money to invest in real estate but there are no homes to buy, you get a housing crisis. So when you hear politicians promising something like access to superannuation funds for home purchases or other demand-side financial tools, remember this. Without building new homes, they are just adding fuel to the fire. These measures increase demand in the market already suffering from undersupply. To address the housing crisis, more homes must be built in the first place. It really is as simple as that. The current Labour government promised new housing construction, but so far those promises remain unfulfilled, a fact reflected in the statistics. It's not my opinion, it's the official statistics that we see. That said, the blame doesn't lie solely in the current administration. While they failed to act effectively, it was the previous government that sowed the seeds of this crisis. In truth, both major political parties have been complicit. Despite their rhetoric, their actions or lack thereof have played out in the data you have just seen. Around 66% of households own property, and more than 21 actually, of them, including many politicians, own multiple properties. These individuals directly benefit from rising prices. At the same time, politicians fear public backlash if prices fall, as that would diminish the wealth of homeowners and investors alike. Do politicians need to worry much about immigrants if they don't have a say in the election? I will leave it with you. Take, for example, an interview with Federal Housing Minister Claire O'Neill in December 2024.
What is the goal here in terms of these policies? Is it to bring down house prices? Is that what the government wants to do?
We want to bring house price growth into something sustainable. So we're not trying to bring down house prices, but we don't want to see some of the growth that we've seen in some parts of the country where you're getting double-digit increases in house prices year on year.
Why don't you want to be seeing house prices drop? Because if you're looking to get into the market, if you're a young person looking at what's ahead of you, you definitely want to see house prices come down.
Well, that may be the view of young people. It's not the view of our government. We want to see sustainable price growth. We want to see more houses come online. We want to see that rental vacancy rate go up a bit because that will relieve pressure on renters. And we certainly want to see more homeowners. And the government has taken action on all of those pieces this week.
Minister, if house prices don't come down, doesn't that mean that this system is stacked against young people, that it's just not going to work for them.
Sure, and Dave, we may have a difference of view about this. I have a strong view. Our government's policies are not going to reduce house prices. We want house prices to grow sustainably. That may be the view of young people. It's not the view of our government. Our government's policies are not going to reduce house prices. We want house prices to grow sustainably. Our government's policies are not going to reduce house prices. We want house prices to grow sustainably. Our government's policies are not going to reduce house prices.
As I have just demonstrated, while demand is largely driven by inevitable population growth, the primary reason for housing prices is the shortage of supply. In other words, the housing minister effectively admitted that the government's policy is to allow prices to continue rising, just not too dramatically. The constrained housing supply appears to be the feature of policy. The government let it get out of control during the pandemic, deliberately or not, we just don't know. So the truth is that the very mechanism I've just demonstrated, the classic supply and demand equation, is applied to achieve the policy of price growth through a construction housing supply. Yet the same mechanism could be used to stop prices from rising further without actually causing them to drop. It's a myth that prices will necessarily drop. Those who regulate the housing supply need only match demand to stabilize prices, preventing them from falling. Let's be honest, property investors profit from the misery of the many. A lucky 20% of multiple homeowners, home investors, celebrate their lucrative property portfolios. This is what passes for state policy in Australia today. The Australian elite have built an unfair society that parasitizes a critical human need: housing. If you found this video useful, please support my work by clicking like, subscribing to the channel, and leaving a comment with at least 7 words. This is how the YouTube algorithms work. In forthcoming videos, we will discuss the future of our roads, clean air in our cities, digital identity and data breaches that could be prevented, and much more. Thanks for watching. Until next time.